Down,
Okay.
and then it's
Thank
all
you.
yours, all right?
All right.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the 4th season of Bootstrapped, a Dingman Center podcast. I'm Ilana Fine.
And I'm Joe Bailey.
And as our listeners know, each episode of Bootstrapped features a funder or founder from the Dingman and University of Maryland community. And today we are thrilled to welcome Melissa Bradley, who is the managing director of Project 500 and a faculty member at our friends over at Georgetown. And so welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So Melissa's, you've worn a lot of different hats in your career, but all in the investing, entrepreneurship, and impact space. Can you just kind of give us a little bit of your background and how your career's kind of been around that ecosystem?
Sure. So I had the privilege to grow up in a family where my mom told me I could do anything, which I realized was not the norm once I got to school, elementary school, middle school, and high school. And I also came up at a time where my mom had lived through the Great Depression, a very tight-knit family, and I would hear about all the bad things that were happening. And being born in 1968, it didn't really get much better for a long time. And so while I became very fascinated with money, finance, and business, I realized there had to be a way that instead of them being two very separate things of the social sector and the private sector, was there a way for them to actually work together? Studied a lot around policy, was not interested in government, but recognized that intersection. And so I had the privilege to go to Georgetown University undergrad and major in finance, went on to do the typical investment banking stuff, realized that that's not what I really wanted to do, and set out to start a business and realized how hard that was as a woman and a person of color, but gained some success, had an exit and was very happy about that, and realized that it was important that when we recognized what was happening in the 90s and the 2000s and that job that was going to last forever no longer existed, entrepreneurship really needed to be a viable opportunity for as many people as possible. And based on some not so great experiences in the banking world and with the SBA and others, I said, now I have the chance to actually give back. And so I became an angel investor, then became a venture capitalist, and then went back to being an angel investor. And there's still a little entrepreneur still living inside.
So you just covered I don't know how many years of in a very impressive and succinct way, of which I'm very jealous because I'm not succinct in any way.
But I've got to imagine, though, Melissa, because you're seeing this from so many different perspectives, it's almost like it's unfair. You've got the other team's playbook, and you can help people understand where they're all coming from and kind of help people kind of make sure that they're kind of checking all the boxes.
And that was important because I realized when I first started, there were no Dingman centers. There were no centers of entrepreneurship at any of the schools that I attended, undergrad or graduate. And so you really were lost. It was like a scavenger hunt with no end. And not even all the pieces there. And so that's actually been something that I really enjoy, that when someone comes in, I understand they're nervous. I understand their house may be on the line. I understand their parents have probably told them they're absolutely, positively crazy, go get a job.
Unlike your mom, who was completely supportive.
Well, no, she still doesn't exactly understand what I do for a living. But she knows I can afford to pay my bills, so that's
Okay.
The bar is low. The bar
All
is low. But I think that that's important. And I think that it has allowed me to cultivate a lot of relationships that are irrespective of funding and just give really good advice. And then say people, look, if you want me to consider you for investment, that's a different conversation. But I think it's most important that you even understand what I'm thinking about, because it's not very often that people tell you. It's kind of like when you go to the principal's office, they could be thinking, how long is this meeting going to take? And you're thinking, he's about to expel me. And so you've got to be able to get into somebody's mind so that you don't waste the 3 minutes you have to give your pitch on stuff that they don't really care about.
So talk to us about what you see as the definition of the impact space and social entrepreneurship, because we've had a number of social entrepreneurs, in studio, and I think that people have a lot of different definitions of what that space is. So from your perspective, what is that space?
So as I teach impact investing and social entrepreneurship, on the first 5 minutes of class, I always say social entrepreneurship does not equal nonprofit. To me, social entrepreneurship is a way of being. It is a means to an end. It is the recognition that business can do well and do good. Sounds very cliche, but we see a lot of big companies like Unilever, like Ben & Jerry's, who have done really well financially, but also have been thoughtful, not in an overly aggressive way, but how do I use paper? How do I maximize carbon offset or those kind of things that have not had a negative impact on their bottom line. And so to me, this concept of social entrepreneurship is really just being cognizant of the holistic consumer who actually cares about what are they using, what's the impact on them and their family, and now actually care what's the impact on the community or the environment.
All right. So with that definition, then, is every entrepreneur, at least potentially, then going to be an impact kind of social entrepreneur?
I think so. I mean, I think, we had Clara Mello, who used to run FB Heron, saying every investment is an impact investment, which is somewhat true. It has an impact. It's not always a positive impact,
Right.
but it has an impact. And I think there are people just like others who are very conservative and narrowly focused and would say, no, every business can't be. I believe that we operate in a spectrum. Everybody and everything is a work in progress.
But that means it must be incredibly busy for you, because any entrepreneur who's coming to your students in class or people who are looking to kind of get your advice and help, I mean, you're not saying, no, this is not what we do. Social entrepreneurship or impact entrepreneur is this, and you're not that.
No, I'm trying to help them understand, first of all, why do they think it's social? Because sometimes it's not exactly.
Okay.
But I think I'm saying, look, if you want to start a business and you want to have a social impact, let's understand first, what is the problem you're solving? I don't care whether you're social or not. If nobody's going to buy it, it's not a business. Second, I say, what's your sustainability plan? Because we've certainly seen some social entrepreneurs have to change course because that is not a sustainable business model. So those are our first things, profit and sustainability. Then we have the conversation in the middle. Once we book in that you've got that idea, then we can talk about how do we reverse engineer or proactively move forward with some kind of social concerns. And there's some we say, you shouldn't do it right now. There's a restaurant that's opened now, I'm happy to say, in the Navy Yard, and they wanted to be all in. And I was like, it's the restaurant business. Margins are low.
Right.
Let's just get the business going first, and then you can talk about all the paper products, and then you can talk about giving away money. But you got to have a business first.
And so as you have these bookends, I mean, there's lots of pivot points that, entrepreneurs experience as they go. Are you helping them navigate and pivot in ways that are embracing the social entrepreneurship?
If it makes sense, right? I mean,
So sometimes it may not make sense, and you'll actually
That's
coach
right.
them and say, now's not the time, or that's not
Put it
the
in
right
the
way to go.
parking lot.
Is that right?
I mean, because I believe that it's important that you are a business first. Otherwise, it's your hobby or it's a not-for-profit. And I will say that I have a bias that the not-for-profit sector is not always the highest functioning sector because you're beholden to stakeholders who don't always have the same mission alignment as you do. And most entrepreneurs want autonomy. They want to be able to control their destiny. Well, you can't do that if you can't pay your bills. So I look at it kind of a stair step. The foundation of that step is that you've solved a problem and you're sustainable. Then let's talk about the environment. Then let's talk about governance. Then let's talk about social, because each of those has a different cost point. Each of those has a different time duration in terms of when you're even going to see the impact. And also want to be clear, if you really are going to dig in, then you better be able to measure it. And that's actually the hardest part, because people say, I'm going to do all these things, but they're telling me about outputs, not outcomes and not impact. And those are all very different things.
So I love the paradigm that kind of you've just put forward in think about the business first. But you have a lot of interest in social impact, social action, social justice, a lot of things that draw those students and entrepreneurs to the Dingman Center, to Georgetown, other places, and they have a passion for solving a problem, but the business is very elusive. And so then the default is, I guess I'll start a nonprofit.
Or think about something else.
Yeah.
It could be a partnership. I mean, I also think that sometimes people who want to solve social problems, let's flip it. I have a problem I want to solve that's socially oriented. Mm-hmm. Then I say, okay, what is that going to take to get that done? Is there anybody else doing it? Same thing. What's the competitive landscape look like? And then again, instead of saying I'm going to be a for-profit, or I'm going to be a B Corp, or I'm going to be an L3C, let function drive form. I think too often people say, I'm going to be this, and they realize, can you afford it? Is it the right structure? Is it going to even allow you to have impact? So then we say, okay, that's what you want to do. Is there a gap in the market to do that? And who else is doing that? Because sometimes you're an additive. You have a nice thing that could be tacked onto something else. And so think about a strategic partnership. You could be a campaign. You don't necessarily need to be something that's constantly in the business of raising money, which we all know once you start raising money, you lose focus on the business. So we really spend a lot of time, is this something that has longevity? Is this something where you have a competitive advantage? Because fundraising is no different from philanthropy than venture capitalists. I would argue probably even harder, and really want to make sure people understand, what does the duration of this solution look like?
And so all the things that we teach in our class about kind of product market fit and understanding the problem flowing, all that still pertains, but now you've got this extra component where you have another kind of objective function.
Absolutely. And I think those underlying elements become even more important because if you think about the low house market and any of lots of consumer groups who are very eco-focused or social justice focused, let's be clear, they have a very narrow lens in terms of how they're evaluating you. So it's extremely important you nail that stuff because it takes time to get the impact metrics right.
But what happens, though, for the entrepreneur? And I know Alana and I meet with entrepreneurs all the time who say, look, we need to bake in the DNA from day one of my startup, even before we have our first customer, that we're going to have a social mission. It's going to allow us to attract the right talent. It's going to get us the right investors. And yes, it may be a restaurant business where maybe we should be wearing this 5 years from now, but if we don't do it from day one, we're not going to go ahead and kind of get that right product market fit.
So as a parent of 6 kids, it can be baked into your DNA, but it may not manifest till they're 5.
Okay.
So my thing is,
I like that analogy.
you can have the intentionality, but you've got to make sure the conditions are right to have that manifest. And let's be clear, when you start talking about social impact, there's a core group of investors who love it, and there's another group of investors who have no clue what you're talking about. So why shoot yourself in the foot before you actually can get the underlying vehicle by which social impact will be created, which is getting the business up and running. So we don't tell people don't do it. We just make sure it's the right time and it actually is contributing to the business, not a hindrance to the business.
And so I'm glad you mentioned that because we have our Dingman Center Angels Investor Network. We have a social entrepreneurship initiative at the Dingman Center. So we want those things to tie together. So we want more social entrepreneurs to come into present to our angel network. And I think over time, I would say over the last 2 years, our investors have become more open-minded. But the initial reaction was, well, that business isn't going to make money. So I do other things philanthropically, but when I'm here and sitting in this room, I'm looking for things that will make money. So I think what you're saying is, that social entrepreneurs need to focus on the business first, and then layer in the ways that you can have that impact.
No doubt.
So kind of the next, and thinking about, for those listening who are interested in this space, where do you see, the biggest market in social entrepreneurship, impact entrepreneurship? Where do you see those opportunities? Like that, where for the business. So like, we talked about, clean water, clean air, workforce training. Like where do you see the business opportunities?
So I think they mirror where the world is, right? I think food has become a huge issue as we as a developed country are beginning to see food deserts much more prevalent. I think some innovations around companies like Foodini, Union Kitchen has been a great savior for folks, but Foodini takes immigrants and employs them as chefs and is now paying them a living wage. Started as a project in a social entrepreneurship class, and now it's making over $250,000. So I think that, food is one. I think media is one. I think anything in the environment, particularly because the capital markets have now opened, and so things like solar and clean tech are there.
Where they need big infrastructure investments.
And a lot of money, right? Green bonds. I mean, now they're starting to mimic more like muni bonds. There's a lot more opportunity around that. But that's also a relatively large-scale business. But I also think if people have an idea, it can be social just by itself, right? I think if you wanted to start a podcast village.
Who would want to do that?
It could be about just providing living wages, which is not the norm. I mean, I think it doesn't have to be this huge leap as if I'm going to the Olympics and offsetting 5,000 carbon units. It's about what is currently not existing that is impeding people's progress. Economic insecurity is huge. Living wage jobs are critical. Heck, jobs that are actually more flexible because people have families. World has changed. Jobs that allow people to partly own the company. And ESOP is creating social impact because you're creating wealth. So I think you have to really widen the aperture on your lens of what is social impact. I think too often it's been something that is highly tangible, extremely scalable. But then the reality is you haven't solved some of the core social problems that we've been living with since the beginning of time.
It strikes me that you really have the ability to go ahead and help entrepreneurs kind of widen that lens, widen the aperture in the lens, and think about everything. When they do that, I mean, do they find it overwhelming? Do they find it liberating? Do they say, Melissa, that sounds fantastic. Now there's all these sources of funding, or they go, I can't even deal with my small number of customers I have now. What's the reaction?
I think it is overwhelming. I think it's exciting. And I think we have to make a distinction, though, that even though there's impact investor market, being a part of that, we are no more liberal than the venture capital market. And I would say that because the impact space, the carve-out is typically much smaller than venture capital, one thing I say is it's going to be great to start at home. but you will have to go off to the big boys and the big girls, and you better be able to make that transition. And so when it comes to money, I think it's always going to be overwhelming, but the importance is getting the story right at the beginning.
So an investor of dollars is going to want to see multiple return on their investment. It doesn't matter what space they're going to be in, even if they do get the warm fuzzies when they're making that investment.
Right, and they're willing to make some concessions. I mean, if you think about philanthropy, right, there has been a huge move thanks to change in ERISA and the fact that pension funds can now focus also on sustainability and issues that concern the stakeholder and not just maximum shareholder value. The reality is that that's still hard to do, and it's not about giving it away. The tremendous increase in the use of program-related investments, which are essentially low-interest loans that foundations give, signals that, one, we don't have enough money to even solve the Sustainable Development Goals, so it really becomes a tri-sector thing. Two, really to change systemic challenges we've had for 100 years, it takes a lot of money, and so you've got to get all the markets to play together.
Is there public funds that are available to solve some of these problems? I mean, especially, are entrepreneurs able to get grants, non-kind of dilution funds?
So there are tons of programs that I would say are government or quasi-government. Okay. So one, for example, in Buffalo is part of Andrew Cuomo's $1 billion initiative. They actually run a pitch competition every year where they pick 8 winners. Top one gets $600,000, next one gets $500,000, and then a whole bunch of 250s. Cool. That is public money that is leveraged by the private sector and the incubator that creates an equity stake, non-dilutive, but it gives them money they never would have access to and resources and supply chain opportunities to the government. And New York's not a small place that they wouldn't have happened before. So I think nowadays what I will say is entrepreneurs are smart in recognizing it's really not about the money. It's about the leverage opportunity. It's about the social capital. It's about the intellectual capital. It's about being in the right place at the right time. I always say, and people don't get it, I think there's a lot of money out there. It's just getting to the point where you're able to attract and retain those dollars based on understanding the investor's orientation.
And so on the intro, we talked about you as your role as the managing director of Project 500. Can you talk to us about what that is and your involvement?
Sure. So Project 500 started as a student project in 2015, actually. Students decided to put on an entrepreneurial event east of the river here in Washington, D.C., where there's not the same amount of resources we see in other parts of the neighborhood. And we had 147 people show up over 2 days. That in itself was astonishing because people said they're not going to come. It's a Saturday. And what happened was when that was over, they said, so when you guys coming back? And I was like, this was a service project.
This was an initiative.
It's a service project. But realize that despite all of the efforts that we see in the city to really foster entrepreneurship and business development, there wasn't a lot of practical tools, particularly for people of color. And so we spent time talking to the city, specifically Deputy Mayor Snowden, who had been a former student of mine, and realized universities are doing an amazing job at startups. There's enough incubators and stuff that are happening. But for the folks that showed up for our meeting, probably 30 to 55 years old, probably going to feel really awkward working into an accelerator, even walking into a co-working space, and probably lacking programming in terms of how to help them scale. They have been lifestyle businesses. They've been making a little bit of money to get by, but how do you get to scale? And so we decided that there was a gap in the market around helping entrepreneurs, any entrepreneur, particularly entrepreneur of color, scale. How do you get from 100,000 to 1 million? How do you get from 1 million to 5 million? And what we found is that even folks in the city are surprised to know there are several hundred just in a year and a half that we found African-American Latino millionaires. But they're not tech-focused. They're professional services. They're construction. So we really have the chance to change the narrative of what does a successful entrepreneur look like. They don't have to be a college student. They don't have to be a tech company. They do have to have a good idea. They do have to solve a problem. And they have to be scalable. And that's the gap that we're filling.
And so what kind of, how are they hearing about you? What kind of, what would be the interaction that you would have over, I don't know, is it over a year? Is it over 2 years?
So the programs vary. Once you come in, you can be a member forever. So we've had people that joined in 2016 and have remained. And so most of it has been through social media, lots of word of mouth now. Our goal was to have 500 entrepreneurs signed up in 3 years. You
just got my next question. What's 500?
So that was the goal because the idea was, were there really 500 businesses, right? That if you look at the CBE certification, which is a generic certification for the city, but try to parse out, people would just be happy if they could see 500. A year and a half later, we have 488 businesses. And they have been referred to us by the city. They've been come from universities. It's been social media. Now it's thrilling. People say, hey, my friend was in your program.
All within just DC?
All within the DMV
DMV,
area.
okay.
Yeah, we started just in DC.
Okay.
And then at the end of last year, people said, well, I'm in Maryland. Can I come? And so what we say is as long as you're doing business in DC,
Okay.
and that's really arbitrary, we just really wanted to start. We knew there were no resources. And so the program supports emerging entrepreneurs, $250,000 or less, 12-week program. High growth entrepreneurs done at Georgetown University, 8-week program. And then we actually have a program, a 7-module online program for nonprofits, because we realize in these communities that typically lack resources, it is the local nonprofit organization doing workforce development, doing youth development, doing crime management that actually helps our business owners stay in business. And we wanted to provide support for them to be able to be sustainable over time.
So if it's Project 500, you got 488. My math tells me that's about 12 slots left. So
right.
if a listener is out there thinking, I want to be part of this, they've got to hurry up, right?
Come on down. That was
Come
a
on down.
number that we picked arbitrarily. We've decided that we are going to continue to go for at least another 2 years. We first said 3 years. We'll go full 5 years.
Okay.
That lines up with one of the economic development plans in the city, and we're pretty confident we're going to tap the 500.
Oh,
pretty
no,
quickly.
I have no
Yeah.
doubt that you're going to exceed 500. But then is the idea to graduate some of the companies that you're working with right now as they've kind of realized their scale?
So we have. So for the high growth program, once you go through the program for 8 weeks, then we keep you on a regular rotation. We subsidize your accounting, your tax, your tech, your branding, and your legal help. And then we graduate. And then 6 months later, our goal is you've actually achieved your financial goal. So for some, it was, I'm at $1 million. I want to get over $1 million. And so we have a whole network of larger businesses and contracting opportunities and access to markets we focus on. For some, it was around employing people. So we track increase in investment, increase in job creation, increase in revenue. Since we've started, we've increased revenue for our folks by an average of 65%. We've increased employment by about 15%. Access to investment is challenging because we don't have a big pool here. That's been around 10 to 15%.
You're not taking an equity position in these companies,
we are not.
are you?
It is completely free of charge. We are fully subsidized by 2 financial institutions and 1 large foundation. That's it.
So it sounds like, that's very impressive, by the way. But it sounds like what you're doing, you're sort of providing a lot of the infrastructure and network and expertise that a tech or high growth company might get if they take venture capital at that stage without having that requiring to take that investment in a different sector. Because it sounds like what you're saying, and we see this pretty often too, is that people get to a certain stage with their business and they might not want to go down that path, and then they don't have the right network of people and support system to help them grow the company, so they end up just kind of stagnating. And you're saying you don't just have to get to have venture capital to be a high growth company.
That's right. We make a similar investment that a venture capital would in the non-financial assets of portfolio management, access to infrastructure, access to technical support. And then we have some people that do go on to get venture capital. We have some people that go on to get loans. We have some people that go on and say, this has made me decide I don't want any investors. I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah.
We have some that have gone on to say, I really want this business now to be a family business, when that was nowhere in their purview before.
And I mean, the show is called Bootstrapped. I mean, do you recommend kind of bootstrapping whenever possible to allow revenue generation to fuel growth?
I do. And I think it doesn't mean that you don't have to take venture capital, but the reality is, having been one, I don't think we're vultures. Let me clear that up. But we have an economic incentive and motivation. We have excessive downward pressure to make sure we generate a certain multiple, and most of us aren't making that multiple. So we're going to have pretty rigid guidelines that we need to have happen in a business in order to return the money to our investors. I think if you are ready to go there and you really believe you're a high growth business, I would even say irrespective of sector, and you're willing to work your butt off to do that, and you want to share in that opportunity, then venture capital is for you. But I've come to realize over time, having gone down that path, it really is about the person and what they want. It should never be an imperative that you have to have venture capital. It is one of many options, and I think too often we've not talked about the bootstrapped option. People get money too soon, they get kicked out of their business, and it's all those horror stories. And it wasn't that the venture capital was bad, probably just not a good fit. They got married before they dated long enough.
Right. So I've got to imagine, if I'm sitting there and I'm looking at 488 companies and I'm thinking about the risk profile, I got to imagine every one of them you're trying to go ahead and help mitigate some of the risk associated with them. But you can't eliminate risk completely.
No.
And that means that some of these companies or partners that you have participants, unfortunately, they're going to fail.
And we tell them to. We
tell
say
them
that we
to.
are your mirror, not your pillow. If it's a hobby and you don't want a hobby business, then you're either going to change or you're not. For our high growth companies, we say you're here because you want to have a business this large. But guess what? You can't keep doing what you're doing to get your business to scale. So we've encouraged many of them to look at tech transfer out of the federal government to diversify their holdings. If you're in construction, how do you look at IoT? How do you look at tech transfer? Changes the multiple on your numbers. You're upselling, increased wallet share, greater audience, not just relying on the subsidies of a construction company. It's not that hard.
And you had mentioned the financial institutions that are backing Project 500. What's in it for them?
CRA. For some of them, it's
All
Community
right. This is
Reinvestment
apparently
Act.
a theme of our
It is.
our episodes. We had John Chapman from EverFi on a previous episode, and he mentioned a very similar
It's a great
motivation.
policy lever.
Yeah.
So I think for one of the banks, they are very clear that we are serving a population that they have been able to reach. And unfortunately, where they live, east of the river, there is one bank, and it's not a deposit institution. It's an ATM, but it still gets counted as a bank. So that's a problem. So we are really helping to extend the dollars that they have committed and required to a community in a series of census tracts. For the other financial institution, it's part of their larger national program called Small Business Forward, really looking at how do we re-energize entrepreneurship in general when we look at the statistics, but certainly when we think about the demographic changes in America, how do we really support new majority entrepreneurs who, let's be clear, African Americans are the fastest growing entrepreneur set right now, according to all the studies. Not a lot of programs out there for them, right? They're not on lots of websites and those kind of things. So their investment for us was focused on the fact that we were already serving entrepreneurs that they were trying to reach in this region.
And so you talk a lot about this region. I know you're involved with Halcyon Incubator, and we partnered with them to do the social entrepreneurshp ecosystem report.
Yep.
And DC was number
Great report.
3. Oh, I'll tell Sarah Harold you said that.
Yes.
And David Kirsch. And all our great students. But, DC ranked number 3, which is great ranking. What as a region for social entrepreneurship and all the different definitions, what do you see as in addition to people like you, what do you see as the makings and the ingredients that we have here in our ecosystem that make us such a hot spot for social entrepreneurs right now?
So honestly, I think the reason we've ranked, and I've been in DC since 1985, is because the universities are cranking out entrepreneurs. I think that the city itself, I think, is trying to become entrepreneurial, but that's just almost the oxymoron for government. I hate to say it. So I think that the environment has been created, though, where there was a time where things have been rezoned, and it's a lot more friendlier to start businesses in certain places. I think that there has been a rise in questionable, but what we call affordable housing. And then I think
it's all relative.
It's all relative.
Yeah.
And then I think the increase in the capacity and skill set of the local universities, right? If you think about all the universities in the region, they've all made some kind of commitment at varied levels to entrepreneurship. They've all been smart enough to go out and actually get real entrepreneurs and not have a bunch of professors teach them. And so I think that has really created an enabling environment to say this is not just an academic exercise, this is real. I do think we benefited from, the 267 route and people moving to the city as that didn't develop fast enough and people did not want to be so far away out in Virginia, respectfully.
Right.
And so I think there's just been a perfect storm in terms of the region benefiting from some ancillary opportunities. I'm optimistic that the city itself will get more engaged as opportunities come along from both the policy perspective as well as an investment perspective.
So you see things improving, even how they're great already, but they're getting better. What are some of the challenges that you see entrepreneurs facing?
I think there's a lot of policy challenges. I mean, I do think the Halcyon report was very clear. One of the reasons probably not number 1 is because it's not getting any cheaper to live here. I think 2, the city and the various agencies, and there's some new leadership coming, so we're optimistic, but there's not a lot of programs for entrepreneurs. There are certification programs, but for example, we don't have a fund. Maryland has a fund. Virginia has a fund. We don't have a fund. That's a huge deal.
Is that your next venture, by the way?
Yeah.
Well, I am a member of the Mayor's Tech Council, and we have proposed it. So we'll see if it manifests now or during re-election. But I think that's a challenge because what happens is I think when people graduate, we probably get them for 8 to 12 months in D.C. because that's where they were already living. And then they go, where's the money?
Yeah.
And
pick up their laptop and then all of a sudden they're either in Virginia or Maryland.
And I have former students at Maryland Venture Fund. Friend runs TEDCO. I think they're doing amazing things. I used to work at CIT. The Gap Fund is doing amazing things. But I also think that those regions have created a personality. biotech out there at CIT, looking at the corridor, supply chain, aerodynamics, high tech stuff. We haven't figured that out yet. And I think, maybe there'll be something that comes whether Amazon comes or not. But I think those kind of exercises make me optimistic because it forces you to move beyond just policy and what you can give away. And it actually makes you become an entrepreneur and think about what is the ecosystem I can create that would invite this large company here. And I'm hoping there'll be some multiplier effect for smaller businesses.
So I want to ask you then, what's harder to basically do an organic growth of entrepreneurship within DC or to attract somebody who's outside of DC and have them move here?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's harder to have organic talent stay because we're not number one. I mean, I'll just be honest. We don't have all the things needed. We're still a government town, so when you're trying to do private sector or sell to Fortune 500, we're still not the first place.
Why is that a bug? That's a feature, it seems like. I mean, especially when you're talking about social entrepreneurship, kind of partnerships, public-private partnerships. I mean, shouldn't DC be the place to?
It should be if it was easier to do those public-private partnerships, right?
I
think part of it is, probably 5 to 7 years ago, I could think of 10 public-private partnerships. I think the reality is that the new model, in all fairness, and in full disclosure, I sit on the FACA for Commerce, so we advise Secretary Ross. The new model is not partnership. The new model is how can we outsource, and that's for pure economic reasons. And so I think that that's changing the dynamics of, again, leverage, right? If I have to do it, then it becomes a much more competitive process as opposed to how do I leverage. I think some of that will change once we get through some of the current political tides of taxes, et cetera, and we begin to then have a moment to step back and say, what are some of the other issues to address? I do think there's some awesome things happening in cybersecurity where there's outsourced or even quasi-acquisitions through the government-sponsored venture funds looking at cybersecurity, tech. I think NASA is doing a really good job. Now we just have to get a little more to the mainstream.
So last question for you. You have, and just sitting in studio with you, and for people who know you and now our listeners, you have so many of the makings of really successful entrepreneurs, so many of the makings of a successful entrepreneur, the passion, the knowledge, kind of the credentials. What are the things that you feel like have in your career have really impacted you and kind of helped you bring together all these kind of skills and talents to be able to, take Project 500 to where it's gone in such a short amount of time, or the other organizations that you've been part of? Like, what is your secret to your success in that way?
I don't know if there's a secret, but I would say it did start when I was young, and my mom literally saying I could do anything and be anything. I think just having that risk tolerance at such a young age, that I was going to make mistakes, but it was going to be okay. I think that's huge because I think so many kids are, don't fall, don't do that, don't hurt yourself, don't play football. Changes their perception in the long run. I think that's huge. I don't want to over-promote it, but I went to Georgetown. I got a great undergraduate education as a finance major, so that gave me the technical skills. So I say my mom gave me the vision, Georgetown gave me the technical skills, and enough of the wrong people told me no, that it was just pure resilience and arrogance to say, I'm going to beat you.
Yeah, we love that. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for being on Bootstrapped, and good luck with Project 500. I'm sure by the time this airs, you probably are going to be at 500 companies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
That's great.
Cool.
Thank you.
That's cool. They'll turn all the questions in the letter. Though.
Yeah, we.
Wait a minute. That was not. I was like, I'm following you, and I was like, oh wait, she took a turn. She took a turn.
Yes.
We
said that. Yes. Sorry.
I know. I saw that.
I think you're the first person who actually has read our email.
Oh, yeah.
So that's.
Well, I was sitting in the doctor's
Yeah,
office,
that's right.
so I had time. I was like, let me be prepared.
Guys killed again.
That was fun.
Thank you. A quick picture.
It was a really good pleasure.
Thank you. Oh, sure. Thank you. That was awesome.
Yes.
Look at everything. Right, this is.
Bring it home. Woo! This is where we lose
Oscar
it.
would coach
All right,
us and
Oscar,
say,
coach
yes,
us up.
this is it.
This is it. Bring it
Come
home.
on,
Woo!
energy level back up a little bit
Okay.
to finish it up.
All right, we can't say. Let's not say. Let's start it with a different way of like. Not that we don't love Melissa. Yeah, that's a good. I like that. She's a smart woman. Yeah, she did give us a lot to think about. I like that.
Okay,
There you go.
we'll go with
Okay,
that.
go with that. No, you started. No one cares.
We're recording, right?
No
We
one
can
cares in
start?
there.
Yes, you are still rolling. Whose headphones? Oh, her? Yeah.
Melissa's.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Alana, Melissa gave us so much.
Oh, yay. I wasn't worried for a second. Then I would worry.
Alana, Melissa gave us so much to think about and talk about here as we debrief.
Yeah, I really liked her approach. First of all, she's very smart, really understands not just social entrepreneurship and impact, but also investing and venture capital. So she brings a lot to the table. But I think that the fact that she emphasized the importance of social entrepreneurs first understanding the fundamentals of creating a business and then layering on whatever social impact that they want to have. I think that is, one, easier said than done because of the background of a lot of social entrepreneurships we see. They don't come often from the business background, so that is a challenge. But I think very important as we look for more investors to invest in companies in the impact space.
For me, I think Melissa was bringing kind of the systemic perspective of all those different perspectives and really hit home, especially in the first part of our discussion with her about the fact that if you have a social mission, that's great. But if you can't take care of your venture and have that product market fit and all the other things that we talk about with people who do startups that may not be focused on social entrepreneurship, you're not going to have any business to go ahead and actually, thrive and succeed. So you've got to do that at least. And I think what she said, which is really important, not just for social entrepreneur, but for any entrepreneur, timing matters. Mm-hmm. What are you focused on now? What do you have to execute on? Because there is this kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And like, if you can't pay the bills, doesn't matter how many people that you're helping, you're not going to be around to go ahead and keep sustaining.
And I think as we switched over to talking about Project 500 in the episode, I thought it was stunning how many millionaires she mentioned of the new majority that are within the DMV, and really had me thinking about us us in the entrepreneurship space and providing services and support to entrepreneurs, that we do have this bias towards technology companies, and we do get maybe overexcited about the companies that are in AI and AR and VR and like the newest, shiniest object. But it's such a small % of the companies and businesses that are out there. And I think she just reminded me that it's important to think about all these businesses as entrepreneurs and all these businesses as having a chance for a significant upside, not just those that are only tech enabled.
I'll be the first one to admit that, I get to work with entrepreneurs who want to start lifestyle businesses. And I must admit, I don't get as excited about that because I think about some, investors who get really excited about the idea of getting, 100x, whatever their investment is. And if someone says, I want to start a lifestyle business, I can't, I'm doing them a disservice by introducing to somebody who's just in it for the money. But that said, there are a lot of people who are interested, not in necessarily the financial reward, although that might be part of it. They're willing to go ahead and make a little bit less of a multiple to go ahead and make an impact and really be a great partner. And I think we've seen this time and time again through our guest in Bootstrapped. Entrepreneurs who really are passionate about what they want to do and are in it for much more than just the money.
But also what she talked about, I mean, I think that when she talked about talking to a construction company, maybe they have $1 million in revenue, but that all of a sudden, like, they could think about, like, how could they use augmented reality to, provide better services to their customer or save time or money in how they might spec a new property. I'm using language I don't really know about, but I think spec is a word in the real estate world.
Let's just go with
but
it
anyway,
a lot, yeah.
But and then think about like how you can tech enable rather than just creating tech companies, how you can then reverse and apply some of the newer technologies to older economy and more traditional businesses. And I thought that was a surprising part of what we learned today, but kind of one of my biggest takeaways.
Alana, I've been in the room when you've given people advice who are starting companies and saying, look, a startup is not like a big company that you shrink down with all the different business units, right? It's a very different entity.
Yep.
And what Melissa is doing is saying to these people who've started incredible businesses, provide tremendous value, is they probably don't have the right structure to scale in ways to make a big difference. So technology is one way to do it. Funding is another way. Think of ways in which you can have work practices to manage your talent and human resources and your capital to get them to kind of see it. And as she said, kind of the zoom out, change the aperture in your lens. I just think it's amazing what she does. And she brings such a wealth of knowledge, and anyway, it was a tremendous fun for me.
Well, that wraps up another great episode of Bootstrapped, a Dingman Center podcast. Thanks for joining us. You can always follow me on Twitter at Ilana Fine or through the Dingman Center at UMD_Dingman.
And I'm Joe Bailey. You can follow me on Twitter at Joseph P. Bailey. Thank you very much to Melissa today for being with us and learning much more about social entrepreneurship. We hope that our listeners who want to be social entrepreneurs reach out to Melissa and others who want to help you bootstrap your next venture.